The cottage on the edge of Maple Hollow stood quietly beneath a blanket of early morning mist. Ivy curled up its white bricked walls, and the porch creaked with the weight of memory. From the outside, it looked like a quaint postcard of rural charm, but inside, the house seemed to breathe. Soft groans from old beams, whispers of drafts curling under doors, and the lingering scent of lavender and something older. Grace Langley stood by the window, holding a warm cup of chamomile tea. Her reflection in the glass looked tired but kind, with soft auburn curls that always refused to be tamed. She wore a loose sweater and slippers, the attire of someone too preoccupied to dress up. "Ellie, breakfast's ready," she called gently. 7-year-old Ellie bounded into the kitchen with her notebook in hand. Her hazel eyes were alight with wonder. "Mom, I wrote a poem about the whispering trees. Want to hear it?" Grace smiled, setting her cup down. After toast, poets need fuel. The two sat across from each other. Grace buttered the toast while Ellie scribbled something in the margins of her poem. A quiet warmth filled the room. Suddenly, Ellie looked up. "Mom, why does the house talk at night?" Grace paused, knife hovering midair. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I hear voices under the floor when it's dark," Ellie whispered. "Sometimes they say my name." Grace forced a laugh. "This house is old, honey. It makes sounds, like creaks, wind, pipes." Ellie frowned. "But it says things." Grace didn't reply. She had heard the noises too, subtle sounds under the floorboards in the hallway, usually between midnight and dawn. But she convinced herself it was the wood settling, nothing more. Later that morning, Grace's husband, Daniel, walked into the kitchen, adjusting his tie. He was clean-cut, meticulous, with a polite smile that rarely reached his eyes. "Morning," he said, placing a kiss on Grace's head. "You're off early," she said. "Client meeting in the city. Could be a big deal for the firm." Ellie looked up from her notebook. "Will you be gone all day?" Daniel nodded. "But I'll be back before bedtime, maybe with a surprise." Grace didn't smile. Lately, Daniel's surprises had started feeling like bribes. He had grown more distant since Grace's father passed away 2 months earlier, and more secretive. His late-night calls, his sudden business trips, the way he stiffened whenever she mentioned the cottage renovations. "I'll be back tonight," he said again, this time more to Grace than Ellie. After he left, silence wrapped around the cottage like fog. Grace walked through the narrow hallway that led to her father's old study. She hadn't touched the room since his funeral. Inside, papers still sat on the desk, and the smell of tobacco and old books clung to the air. She found a worn leather notebook with her father's initials embossed on the front. Inside were strange sketches, floor plans of the cottage, notes written in shorthand, and a series of numbers, with one phrase underlined several times. "It's under the hearth." Grace stared at it. The hearth hadn't worked in years. The fire bricks were cracked, and Daniel insisted they leave it sealed during their renovation. She was still turning pages when Ellie walked in quietly. "Mommy, Grandpa told me something in my dream." Grace smiled gently. "Dreams are how we remember the people we love." "No, he really told me. He said to tell you not to trust the man in the mirror." Grace's stomach twisted. "What man?" Ellie pointed toward the hallway mirror, the one Daniel always checked before leaving. "He said he's not who he says he is." Grace didn't answer. She hugged her daughter a little too tightly. That night, after putting Ellie to bed, Grace returned to the hearth. She knelt down and tapped on the bricks. One of them gave a hollow sound. With trembling fingers, she pried it loose and found a small iron key wrapped in wax paper. Beneath the brick was a recessed wooden slot, barely noticeable. Inside, there was another piece of paper. On it were the words, "He knows about the inheritance. Keep her safe." Her breath caught. The phone rang. It was Daniel. "Hey," he said, voice too smooth. "I'll be home later than expected. Something came up." "Where are you really?" Grace asked quietly. A pause. "Work? Why?" "Daniel, don't come home tonight." What? I know about the fireplace. Another long silence. I don't think you understand what's happening, Grace. No, I think I finally do. She hung up. The next morning, Grace found Ellie in the backyard staring at the tree swing. "Mommy," she said, "a man came to the porch last night." Grace knelt down. "What man?" "He wore a long coat and had gray eyes. He told me to tell you that your father was right and that the mirror lies." Grace shivered. She looked toward the front porch. No footprints, no sign of a visitor. Inside the study, she examined the mirror Daniel always used. The frame was old. She pressed gently along the side. A soft click. The mirror slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a second phone. On it were text messages from an unknown number, some sent recently. She doesn't suspect. I'll have access to the trust soon. The girl might know something. The last message sent just before she got Daniel's call the previous night. She found the key. What do I do? Grace sat down beside her daughter that evening, her mind reeling. "Ellie?" "Yes?" "If anything ever happens, you remember where to go?" Ellie nodded. "The secret place under the floor. Grandpa told me. There's a bed and books and even a light." "Good girl." That night, Grace packed a small bag and tucked it under her bed. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she finally understood. Her daughter wasn't just imaginative, she was warning her. And now, she had to listen. The weathered stone house on the outskirts of Ashgrove carried the dignity of age. Ivy veined its sides, and wrought iron balconies cast long shadows in the afternoon sun. To visitors, it was a charming country home. To Ava Moore, it was both sanctuary and enigma. "Alice, lunch is ready." Ava called from the kitchen, her voice echoing faintly off the high ceilings. 7-year-old Alice appeared at the doorway, barefoot, clutching a sketchbook and a blue crayon. Her honey-colored curls were wild, and her eyes, sharp and strange for a child, scanned the room like she saw more than anyone else. "Mom, I don't want to eat in the kitchen today. Can we stay in the sunroom? The voices are quieter there." Ava paused. "Voices?" Alice shrugged, as if it wasn't strange. "In the walls. They whisper more near Daddy's study." Ava gave a tight smile. Her daughter had an imagination that could rival any novelist, but lately, her stories felt different, focused, repeating strange details she shouldn't know. They sat together in the sunroom, sunlight washing over the tiled floor, while Alice drew a picture of the house. "Where's Daddy?" Alice asked softly. "Still in the city. He said he'd be home tomorrow. Why?" Alice stared down at her drawing. "I don't think he's coming back alone." Ava looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I just know." That night, Ava tried to tuck her daughter into bed, but Alice refused. "Please, Mommy, can I sleep in your room? I don't want to be alone." "Did you have a nightmare?" Alice shook her head. "No, but I saw something today." Ava sat on the edge of the bed. "What did you see?" Alice hesitated, then whispered, "I went into Daddy's study." Ava froze. It was open. He never leaves it open. There were papers on the desk, house maps. There's a tunnel under the guest room floor. Daddy was talking on the phone, saying, "It's perfect. No one will find it." Ava blinked. "Alice, how do you know what he said?" "I was behind the door." Later, once Alice had fallen asleep in her bed, Ava crept into her husband Ethan's study. He was a real estate developer, clean suits, polished shoes, always watching. She'd stopped asking questions about his late-night meetings months ago. The study looked untouched, but when she knelt beside the desk, the bottom drawer, usually locked, slid open. Inside, a folder marked Private Life Insurance. Ava's name. Recently updated. Policy increased. Ethan named as sole beneficiary. Dated 12 days after her father's funeral. She sat on the floor, the papers trembling in her hands. She remembered her father's last words to her in the hospital.
Don't trust him blindly, Ava. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. Coming back early. Need to talk. Important. Tomorrow morning. Ava couldn't sleep. At 3:30 a.m., she woke to the sound of Alice screaming. She ran into her room to find her daughter sweating, curled into a ball. "He's coming," Alice whispered, "and he's bringing someone. We have to go, Mommy." Ava wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Alice, no, listen to me. They want to hurt you. Daddy and Aunt Clara. I heard them on the phone. He said if you're gone, the inheritance will be unlocked, that he'll make it look like an accident." Ava pulled back, heart racing. "Aunt Clara? My sister?" Alice nodded, eyes wide. "She's angry. She said she deserves the money more than you. Daddy said, we'll handle it." Ava had inherited nearly $2 million from her father. She hadn't touched a cent, still too wrapped in grief. The sun hadn't yet risen. The house was still. Ava moved quickly. She packed a small bag, cash, ID, Alice's documents, her father's old journal, and helped her daughter into her coat. Just as they tiptoed down the stairs, they heard it, the metallic click of a key in the front door. Ava grabbed Alice's hand and slipped into the hallway closet. Through the slats, she saw Ethan step into the foyer, followed by Clara, both in dark clothing. Clara was holding something in her hand, a thin plastic syringe. "They're not here," muttered. "They couldn't have known," Clara hissed. "They did. I left the study door unlocked last night." Ava clutched her daughter tighter. "Where would she go?" Clara asked. "If she's still here, we'll find her." They disappeared deeper into the house.
Ava waited only seconds before easing open the closet door. They crept silently to the back door, but a figure was standing there, a tall man in a long coat, smoking. Alice whispered, "There's a tunnel behind the bookshelf in the library. Grandpa wrote about it in his journal." They doubled back toward the library. The old shelves groaned as Ava pulled one aside. Behind it, just as her father had scribbled, was a narrow stone passage, musty with age. They crawled in. The air was cold and damp. Behind them, voices echoed. "She must have seen the papers," Clara said. "This was a stupid plan." "She was never supposed to look," Ethan growled. "I told you she trusted me." "She was starting to ask too many questions." Their voices faded. Ava and Alice reached a small locked door at the end of the passage. Ava found the key taped to the back of the journal. Inside, an old servant's chamber with a hatch that led to the garden shed. They climbed up and out into the crisp dawn. Ava hugged Alice to her chest. "You were right," she whispered. "You were right about everything." Alice looked up, eyes watery but calm. "I dreamed about this, Mommy. Grandpa showed me the way out." 2 days later, Ava and Alice sat in a small hotel on the other side of the county. She had called the police, handed over the insurance documents, her father's journal, and the recording of Ethan and Clara she managed to capture on her phone. Ethan and Clara were arrested the next morning. Ava stared at her daughter, still in disbelief. "How did you know?" she asked. Alice looked up from her sketchbook, where she was drawing the stone tunnel. "I listened. You and Daddy stopped listening to each other, but I kept listening, to the whispers." The police station was filled with the usual static hum of fluorescent lights, murmurs between officers, and the shuffling of paperwork. But at one corner of the room, in a glass-walled interview chamber, sat a woman with soot-streaked cheeks, a trembling jaw, and her arms tightly wrapped around a pale, quiet child. Mary Wilson hadn't slept. Her voice cracked with every sentence, but she told her story with an unsettling clarity that no one in the room could ignore. The detective, a silver-haired woman named Grace Mendoza, sat across from them, flipping through Mary's phone, zooming in on the photo of the insurance policy. This was taken last night?" Mary nodded slowly. "I took it just before I heard Richard talking in the living room. I wasn't supposed to see it. The policy was signed a week after my mother's funeral." Detective Mendoza glanced at Emma, who stared silently at her own reflection in the metal table. "She's the one who told me," whispered, "about the hidden passage, about the plan." Mendoza lowered her voice.
Mary, how exactly did Emma know? I don't know. Dreams, maybe? Or maybe my mother told her. Somehow. Mendoza didn't laugh. She'd worked homicides for 28 years and learned long ago that not all warnings came in ways that made sense. Outside the station, sirens screamed toward the Wilson home, or what was left of it. Firefighters had done their best, but the flames had moved too fast. An accelerant, gasoline probably, had been poured around the perimeter. Intentional? Planned. The tech team confirmed the modified security system. Every door and window rigged to seal at the press of a button. The system was supposed to be for safety, Richard once said. Now it was evidence. And then there was the SUV parked across the street that morning, the same one a neighbor saw driving away at 5:45 a.m. Hours later, the sun was low in the sky when a call came in from a gas station 120 miles out of town. A man matching Richard Wilson's description had used a credit card at the pump and tried to pay cash for a burner phone inside. The officer on duty didn't waste time. 2 units were dispatched. 20 minutes later, Richard Wilson was in handcuffs, his black leather shoes coated in roadside dust, still trying to act surprised. I don't know what this is about. But the officers weren't interested in arguments. In the trunk of his car, a duffel bag with $8,000 in cash, a burner phone still in the package, and a second set of car plates. He was silent the entire ride back. That night, Mary and Emma sat in Barbara's guest room, the same Barbara who had opened the door that morning, with her hands still dusted with flour and coffee mugs steaming beside the stove. Emma sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the sky. Mary approached her slowly. "Can I sit with you?" Emma nodded. Mary lowered herself beside her, arms wrapped around her knees. Emma didn't look at her mother. She just asked, "Is Daddy going to hurt anyone else?" Mary didn't know how to answer. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I won't let him hurt you. Ever." Emma finally looked at her. "I don't think he ever really loved you. Grandma knew. That's why she told me." Mary shivered. "Told you in your dream?" Emma nodded. "She said the house kept secrets, but I had to listen. She said you wouldn't believe me at first, but you did." Mary pulled her close. "I believe you now." For a long time, they sat in silence.
Outside, the embers of a once perfect life smoldered in the wreckage. But inside that little room, in a house with no secrets, there was finally peace. Richard was charged with attempted murder, insurance fraud, arson, and conspiracy. His accomplice, a former employee of the security firm, was also arrested 2 days later. During the investigation, authorities uncovered hidden emails and call records proving the plan to trap Mary and Emma inside the house. Emma's testimony, while delivered in a quiet, childlike voice, was unwavering. She remembered every word. The house was gone, but Mary had something far more important: her daughter, her instinct, and a second chance. The old red brick house in Windmere had charm: ivy on the walls, oak trees in the yard, and wide wooden stairs worn smooth by time. But for Ava Harrington, it had started to feel like a cage. "Amanda, shoes on, the bus will be here soon," she called from the kitchen. Her 7-year-old daughter peeked around the corner, clutching her school folder. "Mom, can I ask you something strange?" Ava looked up from the sink. "Of course." "If someone wanted to make it look like you disappeared, how would they do it?" "Avanda, what kind of question is that?" I dreamed something, and I think it was real." 3 months earlier, Ava's mother, Ruth, had died of what doctors called sudden cardiac arrest. The loss had devastated Ava. Her mother was her anchor. But even in her grief, she had noticed a shift in her husband, Marcus. He became distant, snappier. He began locking his office, always on edge. And Amanda? She changed too. She stopped talking about dolls and started asking questions that no child should know. That night, Ava found Amanda curled up in her bed, staring at the ceiling. "I saw Daddy talking to someone again," she whispered. "He said it would be quick." Ava felt her stomach twist. "Are you sure?" Amanda nodded. "He said, after the fire, she'll be gone, and everything will be mine." 2 days later, Ava found a life insurance policy hidden in Marcus's desk, new, signed in her name. The amount was staggering. The date? 2 weeks after her mother's death. Her hands trembled. She had never imagined Marcus would harm her, but Amanda's warnings echoed louder now. That night, Amanda refused to sleep in her room. "I had the dream again," she said, "and I think Grandma told me something." Ava tried to smile. "Grandma?" "She said there's a way out, in the pantry." Before Ava could ask more, the alarm system clicked. Every window shuddered with a mechanical thud. Mouse slats rolled down from behind curtains, and the scent of gasoline began to seep through the vents. Trapped. Ava grabbed Amanda's hand. They ran to the back door. Locked. She looked at her daughter. "You said the pantry?" Amanda nodded solemnly. "Behind the shelf, there's a door." Ava hesitated, then followed. Just as Marcus's voice rang through the house. "Timing is key. Engage the system. Make it clean." They had seconds. Amanda pushed aside the pantry shelf and pulled a small handle Ava had never seen before. A dark corridor opened, lined with cobwebs and dust. They slid inside just as the fire alarms finally blared. Minutes later, the passage led to a stone-walled cellar beneath the barn. They burst out through a rusted door behind the tool shed, smoke chasing their heels. The house was in flames. Ava didn't look back. Amanda pulled on her sleeve. "We need to go to Mrs. Langley's." "The neighbor." Ava nodded, heart pounding. Marcus Harrington was arrested at a hotel outside the city, trying to buy a fake ID. Documents, cash, a second passport. It was clear he was leaving. He claimed innocence, said his mother-in-law Ruth had pressured him, even posthumously, blaming her death on natural causes. But it unraveled quickly. Marcus's mother, Evelyn, was arrested days later. She admitted to helping him modify the home security system. "He deserved better than Ava," she said bitterly in court. "I only wanted him to succeed." But the prosecution found evidence of financial ruin, secret accounts, and a mistress Marcus planned to flee with. It was a web of lies. And the star witness was Amanda. With remarkable composure, she told the court about the whispers she overheard, the secret door, and the dreams where her grandmother warned her. The courtroom fell silent as she spoke. She said if I didn't help Mommy, we wouldn't make it out. Marcus received 20 years in prison for attempted murder and arson. His appeal was denied. Evelyn was sentenced to 10 years for conspiracy. But Ava's new life didn't begin in the courtroom. It began in a quiet cottage on the edge of a small New England town, smaller, warmer, and full of light. One sunny afternoon, Amanda came home with a wide smile and a sheet of paper. "My art teacher said I get to be in the local gallery." The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands in a field: Amanda, Ava, and Ruth. Ava hugged her tightly. Grandma would be proud. "I know," Amanda said softly. "She still talks to me sometimes, but not about scary things anymore." A new beginning. With the inheritance now finally released, Ava created the New Dawn Foundation to support women escaping domestic danger. She returned to work part-time at a local museum and began writing about her experience. Amanda thrived. She made friends, drew every day, slept through the night. Their therapist, Daniel Cruz, became more than a counselor. At first, just a professional support, but over time, something deeper grew. One snowy evening, Amanda looked at him over cocoa and asked, "Do you think real families are made or born?" Daniel smiled. "Sometimes they're found, in fire or in healing." Ava met his eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. Ava sat by the fireplace on Christmas Eve, Amanda curled beside her. "You were brave, sweetheart. You saved both of us." Amanda rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "Grandma said courage runs in our family." Outside, snow fell in soft silence. Inside, 2 hearts, once broken, were whole again.